What up? So we are going to look at a counterspark tutorial. So one big misconception is that different styles have different counterspark timings. That is not true. Some countersparks have longer animations and more parry frames. So if a counterspark like Tatsumi Ryu has more parry frames with the longer animation, you can essentially counterspark early and still hit your counterspark because you have a longer time where you're in those frames. However, if you counterspark late, that's really not going to help you, right? So it's not that there's different timings. They all have the same timing. I don't change my timings on any style, which is another reason I think it's really good to learn on something like Shinobi or Neo, something with short counter sparking frames that are more forgiving if you miss your deflect. Because obviously, although it's like a high risk, high reward, although this has more parry frames, the animation leaves you way more vulnerable, and it takes a long time to get into a second counter spark. So yes, you can get away with having bad timing on the early side, not on the late side. It's just because it's more frames. Attacks can always be canceled into a counter spark. Martial arts, for the most part, can't. There are a couple exceptions. The main exceptions are going to be martial arts that have these like button mashy combos. So like on the oxtail blade here, if you hit R1 plus X or R1 plus square once, you do this. Twice, you do this. 3 times, you do this. So these martial arts can basically cancel during the spamming animation into a counterspark essentially. And there's a couple other like very rare exceptions, but for the most part, attacks can always cancel. So if you're trying to be super aggressive, you can use your X attacks or square attacks and always cancel those quickly into a counterspark. However, most martial arts can't. However, there are some exceptions with that. So like if we look at Kihitai, whatever the hell style, like this can't be canceled until you finish that first twirl of the animation. Same with this, that can't be canceled until you finish the first part of the animation. However, this, once I get my key back, this can be canceled after the first part of the animation. So if you're spamming an attack like that, you can kind of cancel out of it into a counterspark. And there's a couple other very rare exceptions. Now, also some countersparks can kind of act as attacks. And since you can cancel attacks into a counterspark, it can lead to a really like devastating combo. So if you cancel like a violent gale, or you cancel an attack, the attack still lands. The violent gale still, like if as long as there's like a frame of it being shown, that violent gale will still technically land. If you cancel an attack, that attack still will technically land. And this is very evident when you get into Midnight. I don't know if it's Dragon or the Tiger set, one of the two, whichever has like the violent gale does whatever it does with stances. You can violent gale cancel and still get your you can still get the set to proc essentially. So some of these countersparks, like obviously with Hayabusa Ryu, it doesn't act as an attack, it can't deal damage at all. However, when we look at the oxtail here, this is the counterspark, it can deal damage. So you can, you know, I'm attacking here before I'm hitting the counterspark. It's just I'm cutting it like almost instantly, and you can use that as an additional attack. And most of these counterspark like attacks, if you want to call them that, they do fairly decent key damage, so you can kind of use that to combo in certain situations. However, it's not super useful. It can be, like I really like doing it here. I like this attack a lot. I just think it looks cool, right? Like you do the little like palm blast. One of my favorite like ways to play is to ditch the sword and do oxtail plus fist. I just think it leads to like a cool little like martial arts style kung fu Shaolin style fucking play style or whatever. So yeah, there's not different timings. Attacks can always be canceled. Some rare exceptions of martial arts can be canceled. But for the most part, you're not going to be canceling martial arts. There is another like kind of method, but for the most part, you're not going to be canceling martial arts into flash attacks, or sorry, into countersparks. Now, the next thing that I've seen people not really understand, and it's kind of funny because it took me like, I don't even know how long before I actually realized this as well. It's just not, I don't know why. It should be fairly intuitive. But when you're countersparking red attacks, you see a little glow like in the enemy's body right when you need to counterspark. It basically tells you exactly when to actually hit the counterspark button. So bosses especially that have like really long red attacks that have really like delayed, you know, very big delayed attacks, you don't really have to worry about timing it because you'll see the red glow. So come on, bro, show me your red attack. Do a red attack. So there, you can see the glow in his body right when you need to press counterspark. So the timings are the same always. You can see here, I'm not changing my timing based on any of these styles. I'm just not. And when it's a red attack, as soon as you see the like kind of light red white glow, that's when you want to press it. So there, I kind of did a little early. So now, it's always when you see that glow. Now, just to kind of like one more time go over panic. So deflects don't deal panic until it's the last string of an attack. And the more hits you deflect, the more panic that you will deal. So, if... I can't talk and play, I'm so bad at it. If you deflect the first like 2 or 3 hits of a combo, but you miss the last, you're not going to deal any panic. And again, panic is basically just when he kind of sits there like a jackass for a second. So you can see it's not until the last hit of the attack that I deal panic. And then again, just to kind of... That was a really cool... I missed my initial part of the counterspark there. But since it was Tatsumi Ryu, the second little part caught it, which is where these see, I did it again there. That's where these second like 2 animation ones can really come in handy. However, that's not something, I mean, that takes a lot of practice to be able to pull off like that. And but it's kind of cool, but you're usually going to take little chip damage in the process. So, and again, winded, this is panic, and then winded is when you see the there we got it again, the double animation. And winded is basically like a 0 key an enemy, or a winded an enemy when they're actually open for the critical attack like they are right here, which allows you to crit them and allows you to Azuna drop them. You can see you can't Azuna drop when they're not panicked as well. So yeah, I think that covers everything I want to cover, at least in this short video. So yeah, that's a Counterspark tutorial. Peace.